Most people think survival is about stockpiling food, but the truth is far more brutal. It's about knowing what to eat first when the power dies and everything you own is rotting. Right now, your refrigerator is a ticking time bomb, and when the grid collapses or a blackout stretches beyond a few hours, that food becomes your worst enemy or your greatest asset, depending on what you do in the first 12 hours. If you're serious about keeping your family fed when modern conveniences disappear, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to learn could mean the difference between nutrition and starvation. Let me be direct with you. The average household loses power and immediately panics about their frozen meat, but they're worrying about the wrong thing. The real crisis starts with understanding food decay rates, bacterial growth patterns, and which items turn toxic faster than others. When your fridge dies, you have a narrow window before spoilage accelerates, and most people waste that window making terrible decisions. The FDA states that refrigerated food remains safe for 4 hours without power if the door stays closed, but that's only true if your fridge was at the proper temperature to begin with. Most home refrigerators run warmer than the recommended 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which means your safety window is actually shorter. Freezers give you 48 hours if full and properly sealed, but only 24 hours if half empty. These are not suggestions, they are survival mathematics. Here's what actually happens inside your fridge when the power cuts. Temperature rises approximately 1 degree every 15 to 20 minutes depending on ambient room temperature and insulation quality. Dairy products begin bacterial multiplication almost immediately once they cross 45 degrees. Raw meat, especially ground beef and poultry, becomes a biohazard at an alarming rate because surface area exposure accelerates pathogen growth. Your eggs, which many people assume are stable, actually have a surprisingly short window once removed from cold storage. Meanwhile, your produce drawer is experiencing rapid moisture loss and cellular breakdown, turning crisp vegetables into mush within hours. This is not about being wasteful. This is about understanding food science so you can make strategic decisions under pressure. The first rule of long-term food rotation when your fridge dies is consumption prioritization based on spoilage speed. You must immediately identify and consume or preserve the most vulnerable items within the first 4 to 8 hours. This means dairy products move to the top of your list. Milk, yogurt, soft cheeses, cream, butter to a lesser extent. These items cannot be salvaged once they warm up and cool down repeatedly. You cook with them immediately, you consume them in meals, or you accept the loss. There is no middle ground with dairy. Your fresh fish and seafood come next because they're the fastest spoilers in your entire cold storage system. If you have raw fish, you're cooking it within the first 2 hours, or you're throwing it away. This is not negotiable. Shellfish, sushi-grade fish, and any previously frozen seafood that's been thawed are biological time bombs once temperature control fails. Ground meats follow immediately after seafood. Ground beef, ground turkey, ground pork. Any mechanically processed meat has massive surface area exposure, which means exponential bacterial growth. You have roughly 4 to 6 hours depending on initial temperature before these items become dangerous. Whole cuts of meat, steaks, roasts, whole chickens give you slightly more time because bacteria primarily grow on surfaces, not through dense muscle tissue. But slightly more time doesn't mean safety, it means you have maybe 8 to 10 hours to make a decision. Processed meats like deli slices, hot dogs, and open packages of bacon are high risk because they're pre-cooked and handled, creating perfect environments for listeria and other pathogens. These go into immediate consumption or cooking plans. Your produce presents a different challenge because not all vegetables and fruits spoil at the same rate. Leafy greens, fresh herbs, berries, and cut fruits deteriorate rapidly without refrigeration. These items lose nutritional value, texture, and safety within 12 to 24 hours in warm conditions. Root vegetables like carrots, potatoes, onions, and garlic are considerably more stable and can last days or even weeks without refrigeration if stored properly in cool, dark, dry conditions. Whole fruits with intact skins, apples, oranges, melons have natural protective barriers that slow spoilage. The strategy here is immediate consumption of the fragile items while transitioning stable produce to proper root cellar or cool storage conditions. Eggs deserve special attention because popular belief about their stability is dangerously wrong. In the United States, eggs are washed before sale, removing the natural protective coating called the bloom or cuticle. This makes American eggs vulnerable to bacterial penetration and requires refrigeration. Once your fridge dies, eggs have approximately 1 week at room temperature before safety becomes questionable, but that timeline accelerates dramatically in hot weather. European and many other international eggs retain their bloom and can stay unrefrigerated for weeks, but you need to know which type you have. If you're in a long-term power loss scenario, prioritize egg consumption within the first 3 to 5 days, using them in cooked dishes where thorough heating kills potential bacteria. Condiments and jarred items are surprisingly resilient but require understanding. Mayonnaise, despite its reputation, is actually highly acidic and relatively stable for short periods even without refrigeration once opened, though you should consume it within a few days. Mustard, ketchup, hot sauce, and vinegar-based condiments have natural preservative properties. Pickles, olives, and other brined items remain safe as long as they stay submerged in their brine. Jams and jellies with high sugar content are naturally preserved. The mistake people make is assuming everything in the fridge door needs immediate attention, when in reality, most condiments can wait while you address genuinely perishable proteins and dairy. Now let's talk about preservation methods you can deploy immediately when you realize the power isn't coming back soon. Cooking is your first and most powerful tool. Fully cooked meat can be kept at room temperature for 2 hours, or 1 hour if ambient temperature exceeds 90 degrees. But you can extend this by continuous reheating every few hours if you have an alternative heat source like a camping stove or outdoor grill. This is exhausting and fuel-intensive, but it buys you time. Smoking meat is an ancient preservation technique that removes moisture and creates an antimicrobial surface. If you have access to wood and can create a smoker setup, you can preserve cooked meat for days or even weeks depending on thoroughness. Salt curing works on the same principle. Salt draws out moisture that bacteria need to survive. Heavily salting cooked meat and storing it in a cool, dry location can extend edibility significantly. Canning is the gold standard for long-term preservation, but requires specific equipment and knowledge. If you have a pressure canner, you can process low-acid foods like meat, vegetables, and soups into shelf-stable jars that last for years. Water bath canning works for high-acid foods like fruits, pickles, and tomatoes. The critical factor is having the equipment ready before disaster strikes, because you cannot improvise safe canning procedures. Botulism, the deadly toxin produced by Clostridium botulinum bacteria in improperly canned foods, is tasteless, odorless, and can kill you with a single bite. This is why proper canning education is non-negotiable for serious preppers. Dehydration removes the water that bacteria and mold need to grow. If you have a dehydrator or can create one using solar heat or low oven temperatures, you can preserve fruits, vegetables, and even cooked meats for months. Jerky is just dehydrated meat with the addition of salt and sometimes sugar for preservation and flavor. The key is removing moisture content below 10% while maintaining food safety through proper handling and temperature control. Improperly dried food will mold or spoil, wasting your effort and potentially making you sick. Sun drying works in hot, dry climates but is unreliable in humid environments where mold growth outpaces drying. Fermentation is an often overlooked preservation method that not only extends food life but adds nutritional value through probiotic development. Sauerkraut, kimchi, pickles, and other fermented vegetables can last months without refrigeration once properly fermented. The process creates an acidic environment hostile to harmful bacteria while promoting beneficial lactobacillus growth. Dairy can be fermented into yogurt and kefir, which are more stable than fresh milk. Fermentation requires specific conditions, salt or starter cultures, and anaerobic environments, but the results are powerful for long-term food security. Understanding temperature zones is critical for managing food without refrigeration. Cool storage, 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, dramatically slows spoilage compared to room temperature. Basements, cellars, buried containers, and evaporative cooling methods can create these zones even without power. Evaporative cooling, used for centuries in desert climates, works by placing food in porous containers surrounded by wet sand or cloth. As water evaporates, it draws heat away. lowering internal temperature by 10 to 20 degrees. This is enough to turn a 75-degree room into a 55-degree storage zone, extending food life by days or weeks. Root cellaring is the traditional method for storing produce through winter without any refrigeration. The principle is simple. Maintain consistent cool temperatures, high humidity for most vegetables, and good air circulation. Potatoes, carrots, beets, turnips, cabbage, and winter squash can last months in proper root cellar conditions. Apples and pears need similar temperatures but lower humidity. The critical factors are preventing freezing, which destroys cell structure, and preventing warmth, which triggers sprouting and rot. A properly managed root cellar can keep a family fed on stored produce from fall harvest through spring planting. Let's address the psychological challenge of food waste during a crisis. When your fridge dies and you're forced to consume or discard food rapidly, it feels wasteful and wrong. But keeping unsafe food is not frugality, it's stupidity. Foodborne illness during a survival scenario when medical care may be unavailable or overwhelmed is potentially fatal. Vomiting and diarrhea cause rapid dehydration, and in compromised conditions, this can escalate to life-threatening situations within hours, especially for children and elderly family members. The correct mentality is not, "I can't waste this," but rather, "I cannot risk my family's health and survival on questionable food." This mental shift is crucial for making rational decisions under stress. Creating a food rotation system before disaster strikes is the real solution. This means organizing your pantry and storage so that oldest items are consumed first, newest items are stored in back, and you're continuously cycling through your supplies during normal life. When the power dies, you already know exactly what you have, where it is, and what order to consume it in. This is not just about canned goods in the pantry, it includes everything in your freezer and refrigerator. You should be able to mentally inventory your cold storage and prioritize consumption in under 5 minutes when crisis hits. If you can't do this, you're not prepared. The freezer presents special challenges and opportunities when power fails. A full freezer maintains temperature far longer than a half-empty one because frozen mass acts as thermal battery. If you know power loss is coming, fill empty freezer space with frozen water bottles or bags. These ice reserves extend your safe window and can be used for cooling other foods once they begin to melt. When power dies, immediately avoid opening the freezer except when absolutely necessary. Every time you open that door, you lose precious cold. If you know the outage will be extended, you have a decision window of about 24 hours to either cook and consume frozen items or transfer them to alternative preservation methods. Dry ice and block ice become incredibly valuable during extended outages. Dry ice, frozen carbon dioxide, maintains temperatures well below freezing and doesn't create water mess as it sublimates directly to gas. A 50-pound block of dry ice can keep a full freezer frozen for 3 to 4 days if you minimize door openings. Handle dry ice with heavy gloves because direct contact causes instant frostbite, and ensure adequate ventilation because carbon dioxide displaces oxygen. Regular block ice from ice companies works for refrigerator temperature maintenance but requires drainage management as it melts. 10 pounds of ice can keep a refrigerator cold for about 24 hours depending on conditions. Community and barter considerations become relevant during extended power loss. If your neighbor has working refrigeration from generator or solar power and you don't, you have tradable goods in your dying fridge. Fresh meat, dairy, and produce have immediate value to someone who can preserve them. This is not charity, it's strategic resource management. Similarly, if you have preservation capabilities like canning equipment, smoker, or dehydrator, you can offer preservation services in exchange for a share of preserved food. These community survival networks form naturally during real disasters, and understanding your role and resources positions you advantageously. Alternative power sources for refrigeration should be part of every serious prepper's plan. Solar-powered refrigerators and freezers exist specifically for off-grid applications and medical vaccine storage in developing regions. These units are expensive but provide genuine long-term cold storage capability, independent of grid power. Generator systems can maintain refrigeration but require fuel stockpiles and maintenance knowledge. The mathematics of generator use for refrigeration are brutal. Running a full-size refrigerator on a generator 24 hours per day consumes approximately 2 to 3 gallons of gasoline daily. At 30 days, that's 60 to 90 gallons of fuel just for cold storage. This is why solar or propane options make more sense for extended scenarios. Propane refrigerators, used in RVs and off-grid cabins, offer a middle ground between electric and no refrigeration. These units run on propane gas, which is more storable and stable than gasoline or diesel. A 20-pound propane tank runs a typical RV refrigerator for about a week, making the fuel requirements far more manageable than generator electric systems. The downsides are upfront cost and the need to have the equipment in place before disaster strikes. You cannot improvise a propane refrigerator during a blackout. Food safety testing during and after power loss is critical. The smell test that people rely on is dangerously unreliable because many pathogens produce no odor. Clostridium botulinum, Salmonella, and E. coli don't announce their presence with obvious smells or appearance changes in early stages. The USDA guideline is harsh but accurate. When in doubt, throw it out. If food has been above 40 degrees Fahrenheit for more than 2 hours and you're not certain of temperature history, it's unsafe. This seems wasteful until you watch someone die from food poisoning during a crisis situation when hospitals are overwhelmed or unreachable. Temperature logging provides objective data for safety decisions. An inexpensive refrigerator thermometer that records maximum temperature reached tells you definitively whether food remained in safe zone. If your thermometer shows the fridge peaked at 50 degrees and food was in there for 6 hours, you have clear information that dairy and meat are compromised. Without this data, you're guessing. A freezer thermometer showing the compartment stayed below 32 degrees for the entire outage confirms your frozen food is still safe. This costs less than $20 and removes dangerous guesswork from life or death decisions. Let's talk about the foods you should already have that don't require refrigeration. Canned meats, vegetables, and fruits provide complete nutrition without cold storage. Dried beans, rice, pasta, and grains are calorie-dense and shelf-stable for years if stored properly in airtight containers away from moisture and pests. Powdered milk reconstitutes to provide dairy nutrition without refrigeration requirements. Peanut butter, honey, and cooking oils deliver fats and calories in shelf-stable forms. These are your foundation foods, the base layer of your survival nutrition that remains viable regardless of power status. If your entire food security plan depends on refrigeration, you don't have a plan. You have a disaster waiting to happen. Meal planning during power loss requires completely different thinking than normal cooking. You're not planning for taste or variety. You're planning for nutrition, safety, and resource efficiency. Breakfast might be canned fruit, dry cereal with powdered milk, and peanut butter on crackers. Lunch could be canned tuna or chicken mixed with shelf-stable mayo on bread with canned vegetables. Dinner focuses on cooking the perishables from your dying fridge while they're still safe. Fresh meat cooked thoroughly with vegetables, consumed completely with no leftovers unless you can keep them hot or preserve them immediately. This is crisis nutrition, and it works. Hydration becomes critically important during food preservation and crisis cooking because you're likely working harder physically and sweating more without air conditioning. You're also potentially consuming higher sodium preserved foods which increase water needs. Clean water for drinking, cooking, and cleaning food preparation surfaces is non-negotiable. If your water supply is compromised along with power, you're facing a compound crisis that requires immediate prioritization of water security before food concerns. You can survive weeks without food, but only days without water, and dehydration makes every other survival challenge exponentially worse. Sanitation and waste disposal during extended power loss affects food safety directly. If your refrigerator is full of spoiled food, you need a disposal plan that doesn't attract pests or create health hazards. Burying organic waste away from living areas works if you have land. Sealing it in garbage bags and storing it away from your home until trash service resumes prevents pest problems and disease transmission. Composting spoiled vegetables and fruits is ecologically sound, but must be done properly to prevent attracting rats, raccoons, and other disease vectors. Meat waste cannot be composted safely in home systems and must be buried deep or disposed of through other means. Documentation and learning from each crisis strengthens your long-term preparedness. After power is restored, write down what worked, what failed, what you wished you had, and what you wasted. This post-crisis analysis is where real learning happens. Maybe you discovered your freezer wasn't as full as you thought, or you learned you don't actually know how to can food under pressure. Or you realized your family refuses to eat certain preserved foods regardless of hunger. These lessons guide your next round of preparation and make you genuinely more capable when the next crisis arrives. Because it will arrive. The hard truth about long-term food rotation when your fridge dies is that it's not really about the fridge at all. It's about having built a food security system before disaster strikes that doesn't depend on fragile infrastructure. It's about knowing food science well enough to make life or death decisions in real time. It's about having preservation skills, equipment, and alternative storage methods ready to deploy immediately. It's about mental preparation to make hard choices about waste versus risk. Most importantly, it's about understanding that modern refrigeration is a luxury, not a necessity. And humans have preserved food successfully for millennia without it. When that power dies and your fridge goes silent, you're not facing catastrophe if you've prepared correctly. You're facing an inconvenience, a test of your knowledge and planning, but not starvation. You know exactly what to eat first, how to preserve what you can, and how to safely discard what you cannot save. You have alternative storage methods ready. You have shelf-stable food reserves that don't need cold storage. You have the skills to ferment, can, smoke, salt, and dehydrate if needed. You have community connections for barter and mutual aid. This is what real food security looks like, and it's completely achievable with proper preparation and knowledge. And if you want to go deeper into specific preservation techniques, detailed food safety charts, and step-by-step guides for emergency food management, you'll find valuable resources and documents in the pinned comment that can take your preparedness to the next level. Check them out when you're ready to build a truly resilient food system for your family. Don't just watch this and forget it. Take action today. Share this with someone who needs to hear it before the next blackout catches them off guard. Comment below with your biggest food preservation challenge. And if you're serious about survival, subscribe now, because this channel teaches what others won't. When the grid fails and everyone else is panicking, you'll be the one who knows exactly what to do.